Bed and breakfast on a Monday. What's good, people? Good to have everybody back. Ben Heisler slightly under the weather, so apologizing in advance. But I got my guys Reed Wallach and Peter Dewey here. Gentlemen, good to see you. Happy 1 week or less to the start of March Madness. It is a good time to be a sports bettor right now.
Happy conference championship week. Arguably better than the tournament, some would say. There's a sect out there.
Some would say. I don't know if I would be one of those people to say it, but make your argument then. Why is conference championship week actually better than the NCAA tournament?
More games, more familiarity. I don't know. I just think that there's a lot more going on this weekend. I think it's like the perfect appetizer for the tournament. Stakes aren't as high, obviously, but like the mix of like the mid majors getting in, and this weekend kind of showed it. Like the Morehead State Murray State game Saturday was awesome. I think that I think people underrate conference championship week, to be honest.
Where are you on this, Peter? Because I think actually you described it perfectly, Reed. It's the appetizer. Like I love a good wings, love a good spin dip. But it's not typically, unless I'm going for a happy hour, the reason I want to go to the restaurant. It's Fair. Enjoyable. Sometimes you bring them all together and you get lots of them. You share them with friends. But no, I want my steak dinner.
Yeah, this is a great week. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
for sure.
I love conference championship week, but I don't think there's very few things in sports that are better than that first weekend of the round of 64, round of 32, where you just have games all day, every day. That is really hard to top. And I know we kind of get that with conference championship week because everybody's playing, but at the same time, it's just the level of competition. It takes another step in March Madness. It really does. Like some of these smaller conference tournaments, like Reed, I'm sure you watch almost every game because you love college basketball, but it is hard for me to get into like a 7-10 matchup in like the SoCon. Like I can't do. I'm probably not going to be that into it, but you get me anything in the NCAA tournament, I'm watching.
I was one of those guys, and I'm sure you guys were able to do this too. When the NCAA tournament started in school, we had a high school radio station. And I don't know how they let us, but they had like an actual cable TV that was probably the size of like the screen of our phone that you're probably watching this broadcast on right now. And there would probably be about 20 of us that were all doing radio that would just sort of sneak away from class and go up to the top floor of our high school and just sneak away and watch the games. Like I just have such vivid, wonderful memories of not really skipping class, but just sort of working around class.
Yeah, no, for sure. I did the same thing. I did that in high school too. Whether it was like finding a way, like because in high school I had like a cell phone, so I would like kind of check the scores on my phone. But obviously the teachers would like freak out if you had your phone, so like you have to like be sneaky about it. You have to like know which games were when and like stagger your. Oh, can I go to the bathroom during class so like you could go check the scores and whatever. Or like if like you had like the computer tech class, you could like just like kind of have like an ESPN sidebar the whole time. So yeah, everyone had like those like workarounds during March Madness for sure.
And the other component too. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
I was gonna say I think the best one I had is when the March Madness Live app was. So whenever that started, I just remember being in high school and sitting, making sure when I walked into a classroom, sitting by an outlet, plugging my phone in and just propping my phone up on my binder and watching whatever like the 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock game was. And like the end of my high school career, I always made sure I had study hall at the end of the day so I could just sit in there and watch one of the games. It's good times. Good times.
If I remember the RJ Hunter, Ron Hunter, like fall out of his chair or his like little wheelie thing. I believe that was like an early game, either the first Thursday or Friday of the tournament, because I remember I was in class and my teacher at the time happened to be the man, and he put on the end of the game because it was obviously a big upset. So he
that's great.
Streamed the end of the game at the end of our class. Like the timing worked out, so we caught the end of it in class. So I remember that the RJ Hunter 3 against Baylor.
And
that's one of the best March Madness, man.
Yeah, that was great.
I agree. Yeah, that was fantastic. And it's one of the teachers that you remember. Like you might have and again, like for all the teachers that might be listening, like of course we obviously care about the lesson plans and the actual education. But I mean, we're telling this story how many years later, Reed? Like from the time that happened?
This must have been 2014, if my memory's right. I graduated high school in 2015, so something like that.
Okay,
2014.
we're talking about 8 years ago.
Yeah,
That stands out. Like, we're having conversations from when I was in high school in 2003, 4, and 5. Like, it's the things that we remember. These help your legacy carry on. Exactly. So speaking of legacies carrying on, we do have conference tournament week. As Reed said, maybe arguably the part that could be better than the NCAA tournament at times. Certainly, I think about those crazy Big East tournaments with Kemba Walker and UConn going all the way through. Some remarkable Big Ten conference tournaments in the past as well. We've already seen a couple teams already punch their ticket to March Madness in Loyola Chicago as well as Murray State. We'll actually keep track of all those teams for you so that you can sort of have it as a bookmark for you over at BetSided. But I know we're going to get into our favorite best bets for conference tournament week a little bit later on, but I kind of wanted to get your guys' perspective on a few tournaments that might be starting on the earlier side. And any ones that maybe we should be jumping in on early, or if there's any teams that stand out. So as week 2, because conference tournament week actually started last week, finally gets going, give me the team or the conference tournament that maybe you guys have your eye on. Peter, I can start with you on this one.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Mountain West. I just think it's going to be one of the most competitive conference tournaments. Like, you look at the top of that conference, and there's probably 6, maybe 7 teams that can win the conference. Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, Wyoming, UNLV, and then Fresno State, Utah State. I mean, you can't sleep on them. Those teams are both plus 1,200 at WinBet, but I don't think they're like as much of a long shot as it may feel to win the conference. I like Wyoming a lot in this one. They're plus 700, and really it's just going for the value. Like I said, like, anybody can win this conference. Wyoming has won big games against teams in this conference. Other teams have won big games against teams in this conference. But the thing I like about Wyoming is they shoot the ball extremely well, and they don't allow their opponents to shoot very well. They're 61st in effective field goal percentage, and they're 60th in opponent effective field goal percentage. So kind of trying to hang my hat on good shooting teams. That's been like my motto going through this entire season. I'm just going to kind of carry that into conference tournament and the NCAA tournament. It's just, when you have good shooting teams in college basketball, you avoid those long scoring droughts that can really swing a game. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. But the Mountain West, like, you could pick out of a hat. And I mean, this conference is going to be so fun to watch. So definitely have my eye on that one for sure.
Yeah, they've been so good all year. And I'm jealous that, both of you guys have been watching more Mountain West games than I have consistently over the course of the year. I jumped in more so after the end of NFL season. But as far as the Mountain West goes, Reed, any teams other than Wyoming maybe stand out for you?
I think that, Peter really hit the nail on the head that it is wide open. There are several teams that could come out with it. I'm trying to pull up the bracket because the way I look, and when we get to kind of, I guess, my pick, I think you have to look at the bracket when you're looking at this stuff. And
sure,
for me, if there is a team that can make a run in, because again, I don't like Boise State as the I believe they're around plus 300. I don't really see value in going chalk here just because everyone is very close. These teams know each other very well. I kind of like Utah State coming from the 7th seed. They've had a really tough go at it this year. A lot of injuries, a lot of poor variance throughout the year. They should have beaten per shot quality Colorado State 2 weeks ago. They get them in the quarterfinals if they get past Air Force, which I think they will. And then they have experience beating San Diego State, who could be their semifinal matchup. They beat them by, I think it was 17 points a month and a half ago. So Utah State, they have a great wing in Justin Bean. Brock Miller's back from injury. I think the Aggies, if we're looking long shot, I think they're north of 10-1. They could make a run. I'm kind of mulling taking a stab on them, honestly.
Interesting. So they have to play one more game relative to their competition.
But yeah, they're going to be big favorites against Utah State, though. Like, they'll be laying double digits against Utah State.
Utah State will, or you mean against Air Force?
Against Air Force, I'm sorry. Utah State will be massive favorites against Air Force. I'd be shocked if they lost that game. So, again, sometimes the bye helps you, but also the bye gives you enhanced value in a game you're very likely to win. So, like, in this case, I think people are like, oh, Utah State has to play an extra game. Yeah, but they're playing Air Force, who is terrible. So, I think that, sure, they could lose. I'll pull up their recent results against them from this season, but I think Utah State will get past them. And then I think they're going to be somewhat live to beat Colorado State. So I think you're getting kind of enhanced value.
All right, fair enough. When it comes to that opportunity, you're right. It's wide open in the
Mountain. Of course,
West.
they lost at Air Force on December 29th, 49-47, but then they did beat them by 27 at home in February. So take it for what you want.
And Air Force is a fairly slow-paced team, so like you're going to have that go. Those types of matchups can happen every so often where the pace favors the lesser team. They get some stops, other team doesn't make shots, and they end up being okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Utah. I do. Wyoming's. Those are my guys, but I think if we're looking like deeper down the board, I think Utah State has some value.
All right, so Utah State, Wyoming, both some intriguing plays on the board for the Mountain West. What about for you, Reed? Which are the conference tournaments or perhaps teams that you have your eye on, at least in the earlier stages here?
I like Marquette. I did some work on this last night, and I bet them at 9-1. I know 7-1 is kind of the more widely available number at WinBet, but I think 7-1 is also good. Just looking at their path, I think that they're somewhat undervalued. They play Creighton in the 4-5 matchup. The Big East kind of sets up interesting, especially the bracket. I wish like we could bring in the bracket so I could talk it out, but Providence, of course, is the 1 seed, and everyone's talking about Providence, how no one likes them, how the market doesn't like them, all that. Okay, so let's keep playing against that. It even helps this case because there's 3 first-round games, and then the 4 and 5 play each other. And the 4 and 5 is Marquette and Creighton. And Marquette lost to Creighton in double overtime and then by 1 or 2 points 2 weeks ago. So, okay, maybe a toss-up game in the 4 or 5. But that being said, Creighton now doesn't have their starting point guard, Ryan Nembhard. So Creighton is worse now. So I like Marquette here. Also, they then play Providence, a team that they lost to in a heartbreaker, and a game they were plus 2.5 on the road. So again, the market's going to look at Providence. That's a near pick'em game. So again, you're getting bigger numbers in games that they have a chance to be arguably favored in. And then it helps me even more because Villanova and UConn, the two, I guess, odds makers, favorites to win this tournament, they play each other in the semifinals if all goes chalk. So again, Marquette could get to the finals in a game, in 2 games where they're a pick 'em or so, minus 130, plus 130 in that range. And then you're in the finals against Villanova or UConn if those two get there. And all of a sudden you're in the finals with a big ticket and you could maybe look to hedge, you could play it out, whatever you want. But to me, the bracket broke perfectly for Marquette to make a run at the Garden. That being said, also Shaka Smart, first year at Marquette, he has plenty of success in tournaments. Obviously, quick turnarounds is where Smart's havoc-driven defense thrives. He's won 2 conference championships at VCU. He won the Big 12 tournament last year against with Texas. And I like Marquette. I think that they're havoc-driven defense. They play super fast. They're tough prep. They play 27th fastest tempo. They are number 2 in the Big East in turnover rate. They protect the ball well themselves. I just think that this is a team that can make a run, so I like the number.
Yeah, Reed, I love that pick because, as you know, our best bets video a few weeks ago, I said Marquette was one of my dark horse teams to make the Final Four, and part of the thinking in that is, can they win the Big East tournament? And the bracket literally could not have broken any better for them because of Nembhard's injury. Like Creighton was surging the end of this season. They still played well, but I just don't think they're going to be able to overcome that injury and really make a run in this tournament. And I think the other way to look at this is, if you're Marquette, now you can go, you beat Creighton, you can knock off Providence, and you possibly get a shot at Villanova in the final.
Team they beat twice.
And so if you beat them again, like how far does their seeding go in the NCAA tournament? Like they could really improve their resume. Like there's so many teams in these conference tournaments that can do it. Marquette is one that can really improve their resume. And like you have to start thinking, if they win the Big East, like where do they land on like that 4 or 5 type of line? Because they're going to have so many quality wins this season. So I love that pick for sure. The Big East tournament is another one of those where I feel like it's kind of a toss-up. Like Villanova is the rightful favorite, but I think there's a few teams that can win that tournament for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Marquette is also one of those teams that'll scare you a little bit too, because you're right, the defense does play at this time of year, but then there are also times where they miss out on opportunities against teams that they should absolutely beat. And that's almost kind of been a staple of Shaka teams over the last handful of years. Certainly this year at Marquette, they've had plenty of opportunities where they probably could have moved up a little bit further in the standings. But I think from a talent standpoint and from a matchup standpoint, if it's right, then they can hang with anybody, especially in the Big East. So from a value standpoint, I think it's absolutely there. I started digging into the WAC a little bit, believe it or not. And
I have a lean in the WAC. I'm curious what you're going to say.
Okay, well, I kind of like Stephen F. Austin.
Oh, that's mine.
Yes. Oh, I feel very, very good knowing that you and I are leaning the same direction here. So looking over at the odds at WinBet right now, New Mexico State's the favorite. They're at plus 160, followed by Grand Canyon at 3-1. And then Seattle and Stephen F. Austin both come in at plus 475. They're a team that's extremely hot right now coming out of that conference. They're 5-0 in their last 5 games. And I was looking at this both relative to their season-long stats as well as this 5-game sample, which I think is indicative of teams that are just playing well, can set up very well, ride a little bit of momentum into the conference tournament. They have the second best net rating in their last 5 games at plus 14.9. Reed, I was actually thinking about you when I put these numbers together over at CBB Analytics, because I was thinking about what you'd always been talking about with KenPom teams from adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency, right? You want teams that are in the top 20 for both of those that give you the best chance to win the tournament. But their offensive and defensive rating over the last 5 games has been outstanding. They're in the 88th percentile in offensive rating at 112.3. That's by far and away the best in the WAC. Their defensive rating has been very good as well, 97.4. A couple teams that are slightly ahead of them in Grand Canyon and Abilene Christian. But Stephen F. Austin from both sides of the ball is doing really, really well. They have by far and away the best effective field goal percentage right now over the last 5 games. They're in the 96th percentile. They're great at getting to the free throw line, and they're by far and away the best offensive rebounding team in the WAC. So they're going to get second half possessions. They're going to be able to go and get free throw shots, and they're going to make them as well. Purely based on sort of opportunity, with everyone being a little bit crowded up. They're the 3 seed in this tournament, but they're sort of at the 4 level when it comes to the odds. They have as good of a chance to win this tournament as anybody, especially with how they've been playing as of late.
Yeah, no, I was, obviously doing, prep for the pod and, looking over the odds for where, I see things, and I ended up just kind of liked my cap on Marquette a little bit more, but no, I was looking at the odds and I felt the same way that to me, it was Stephen F. Austin. I have kind of been liking the Seattle a little bit, but I just like how Stephen F. Austin's playing. Their numbers translate really well. Again, I'm trying to get the bracket up as fast as I can here, but
I have it for you. So it is.
They have only a single bye, right?
No, I think they have a double bye.
Okay.
Because they get the winner of Game 5, which is against number 4 Utah Valley, and then the winner of Game 3, which is either Seattle or UT Rio Grande Valley. That winner plays against Abilene Christians, and then that. Oh wait, yeah. Am I looking at I might be looking at the wrong bracket. I think I was looking at the women's round. No, fake out. The winner, they do play in the second round against the winner of Game 4, which would be against number 6 Abilene Christian, or the winner of Game 2 between Chicago State and Utah Valley.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is why I like Stephen F. Austin here. Abilene Christian. I know that everyone's going to resonate with them because last year they beat Texas. Ironically, we're just talking about Shaka Smart, but this is not the same Abilene Christian team from last year. Yes, they still generate a lot of turnovers, but their defense has taken a considerable step back. They're now they're 99th in KenPom's adjusted defensive efficiency. If they're not generating turnovers, they're letting up buckets. And again, I think that they could get gashed inside by Stephen F. Austin, who has the number 1 2-point offense in the WAC. So again, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the odds Abilene's higher than Stephen F. Austin just based off their name alone. I think that's incorrect. Obviously, Stephen F. Austin has to play 1 less game. And also, I like being on the opposite side of New Mexico State, who's like the clear favorite.
Yes, absolutely. So good opportunities there. Peter going with Marquette, Reed going with Marquette. Peter had them a handful of weeks ago in his best bets and dark horse picks to make the Final Four from that perspective. And then Peter, of course, going with Wyoming to win the Mountain West. Stephen F. Austin for me at plus 475 to win the WAC. Those are some of our early leans. We'll have all of our favorite best bets from conference tournament week coming up on Tuesday in our best bets video right here over on YouTube. I got to go to Peter because he's been keeping track of all the latest MVP movement in the NBA this year. It kind of feels like a bit of a two-man race between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. I've been trying to yell from the top of the mountaintop for either Ja Morant or Luka Doncic to continue to get consideration, especially with how good both of those guys have been playing as of late. But you've been doing the research, Peter. You've been tracking this all season long. Is this for sure a two-man race and a two-man race only? Does Giannis start to get himself into the mix as well? Could Steph Curry make a run? DeMar DeRozan's been around for a while. Like, where are we right now when it comes to handicapping the NBA MVP race down the stretch?
So this is far from a two-man race, Ben. I think if you're trying to build out your portfolio now for MVP, there's still some value in taking guys that are not named Joel Embiid, who's the odds-on favorite right now at -115 at WinBet. And there's a few reasons why. There's basically you made a great point this past week on BetSided about Luka Doncic, because the Mavs are 22-7 since January 1st. They're playing some of the best basketball in the NBA, and so Luka Doncic has been the driving force of that. You have to make some kind of argument if they can move up the standings. But I think the bigger argument you have is the Ja Morant one at 12-1 right now, because the Grizzlies are now the 2 seed. And the big thing I like to do with some of these awards in the NBA, and I think it's unfortunate that we have to do this because value is derived in so many different ways. Like we've talked about the plus minus the off-on numbers of Nikola Jokic. The Nuggets have a net of like plus 20 when he's on off the floor this year, which is by far more than anybody in the NBA. They have the worst net rating of any team in the NBA basically when he's off the floor. Like if you took Nikola Jokic off this team, they'd have a worse net rating than the Detroit Pistons. That's how valuable he is. But obviously that's not how this award is voted. And so you have to go back and you got to look at this. And so some of the trends that I've noticed of not just the past 5 years, we're talking all time. So prior to 2017, when Russell Westbrook won the MVP as the 6th seed for the Thunder, 30 of the 31 previous MVPs were either a 1 or a 2 seed. The only one who broke that trend was Michael Jordan, won it as a 3 seed. So everybody else was a 1 or a 2 seed. It was basically the voters were saying, if you're the best, one of the best teams in the conference, it's going chalk. Since then, Westbrook and Jokic have broken that trend. Jokic was the 4 when he won it last year. So the argument there is people are getting smarter in terms of how they're voting these awards. It doesn't have to be from the best team in the best conference. Like, for example, the Suns. Devin Booker right now is plus 4,000 to win the MVP. There is no way Devin Booker should win the MVP over some of these other guys on the board. It just shouldn't. I don't care that he's on the best team. So the voters are going to have to make a decision. Ja Morant could be in that top 2. Joel Embiid is most likely going to be in that top 2 in the East. Then you look, if Miami hangs on to the 1, that kind of knocks DeRozan out of that conversation with the Chicago Bulls. So there's a bunch of moving parts here. Steph Curry has really played himself out of the MVP. I don't know if there is a real path for him at this point, especially if Golden State doesn't fall in the top 2. I don't see it. But then the other trend I want to look at, which I think this one it might be the more important trend, is in the history of the MVP award, there is one player who has won the MVP without playing 85% of his team's games. And that is Bill Walton back in the 77-78 season. He played 58 games and won the MVP. Everybody else who has won the MVP has played at least 85% of the games. So then when you look at, you come down this list and like Kevin Durant, for example, I wrote about this when he got hurt. He was out of the race at that point because he wasn't going to get to that threshold. And so Kevin Durant could go crazy these next 20 games, and there's no way that he has a chance to win the MVP. It's just the precedent is not there. So I think right now, like I've been screaming that Jokic is the MVP. I think just his on-off numbers, there's just nobody who can compare. But the big thing for me is you can't sell your soul on Embiid because the East is too close. There's no way at -115 he's worth it, because if the Sixers drop like 3 or 4 games at some point later in the season and they fall behind the Bucks or they fall behind the Bulls, now DeRozan and Giannis have cases to take the award over Embiid, and you don't want to be betting on Embiid at -115. So I think there are plenty of ways. Like if I was going to build my MVP portfolio right now, I think I'd take a shot at Doncic. I think I'd take a shot at Morant, and I think I'd take a shot at Jokic before I went anybody else, just purely off of Morant's got a chance to put the Grizzlies top 2. Jokic, if they can move from the 6, I believe they're a game and a half out of the 5 now, or a game out of the 5. If they can move into that 5-4 range, I think he's got a shot at it again. And then Doncic, the same thing. They've been really hot. So if they somehow come and they overtake the Warriors in the West, I think there's an argument for those 3 guys for sure.
All right, so here are the latest odds right now over at WinBet for those guys. You have Embiid at -120, followed by Jokic at +200. So you're still getting plus value for somebody like Peter said. That's his guy at the top of the list based on all the different research compiled here. Giannis comes in at +550, followed by Morant at 12-1. Curry still hanging around at 20-1, although we just talked about how his odds are probably more so from a name brand value and because he was in the lead at the beginning of the season. DeMar DeRozan had a massive leap, I remember, at the start of the second half from 25-1 to as low as 8-1. But with the Bulls struggling and struggling to get some consistency going, he's probably out of the mix as well, although he's had a great season. And then you talk about Doncic, who I still feel is worthy of consideration. You talked about how the Mavs are in their last 29 games, 22-7, and he's been a direct result of it. He's averaged in those last 29 games, 29.3 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists. These are crazy numbers for somebody that is leading that way. And I also think about all the different comebacks that they've had after he's gone off the court. And I think we wrote about this over at BetSided as well. I think Donovan Smoot wrote this one up. When Doncic leaves, it's kind of like your Jokic argument, right? When they're off the court, their team, I don't want to call them a disaster, but they blow leads constantly. And then they need Doncic back on the court to be able to make it happen. Same thing with Jokic. By the way, Jokic via Action Network, 46 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, 4 blocks, 3 steals last night. He is the only player in NBA history to ever record that stat line since steals and blocks started being tracked. Absolutely insane season for Jokic and absolutely noteworthy in that conversation. Reed, is there anybody that we need to consider as well?
I think it's Embiid or Jokic. That's how I see. I think that DeRozan, Morant, Doncic, I think that they just have too much ground to make up. I think if it's not Embiid, it is Jokic who goes back to back just for the effort. I mean, look at that stat line you just rattled off. And I think that especially given how clumped up everyone is at the top, I know Phoenix, they're kind of a by committee team anyway, and they're far and away the best team record-wise. But I don't see voters really giving DeRozan the nod over Embiid because they're 3 games better than the Sixers, like if that's what it comes down to. Or if the Grizz get the 2 and the Nuggets are the 5, but Jokic is playing with 4 janitors. I don't really see I just don't see the voters giving – I don't see enough of a shift in the final 15 to 20 games across the league, taking the narrative away from Jokic and Embiid, if that makes sense. I think that next season might be Morant's if he could follow it up because he now has precedent. Like it's almost, he came on too fast, like for him to win this award. So I still think it's Embiid or Jokic. I still almost give the nod to Embiid because he hasn't won it. And he has been so great. And like now they have Harden, they seem to be looking more like a championship contender. That's only helping his case. And he's just getting fouled at like an absurd rate that his numbers are just going to keep looking gaudy. But yeah, I just think that to me, it's Embiid or Jokic just because they have the season-long candidacy that I just don't see these voters. We are basically betting on a subjective award that people vote on, typically of the older belief and slow to react to certain things. So right. That being said, you almost have to throw out what might make the most sense and look at, well, what's actually happening. You know, you need to try and remove the bias like that. Like the MVP, the NFL MVP, I thought that like Tom Brady, like it's recency bias again. So like maybe they can make a run, but it's 82 games versus 16. So it's a little bit different, 17, right. But a little bit different.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've been looking back on some of these trends, because you just see where have the voters gone? Just why do they keep going to these same spots? And I think the argument I've had, even though I still think Doncic is in the conversation just with how well he's played, but like the argument for Doncic, he's not going to reach that 85% threshold this year, right, because the Mavs have 18 games left. He's only played 48. So that is like, that would be kind of what takes him out of the running. But this is the crazy thing. This is why my last Jokic point that I will hammer home. So we talk about how bad the Mavs have been with or without Doncic. The Mavs this year per 100 possessions on off, with or without Luka Doncic, they're plus 0.1 points per 100 possessions. That's his on off. Joel Embiid is plus 11.6. Okay, so that's why he's the MVP favorite. Nikola Jokic is plus 16. Difference of how much better.
All right, Peter's connection just got a little bit unstable.
Something really good.
Yeah. Oh, as soon as we get him back, we're gonna need him.
He was so passionate about it too.
I know. Oh, this is devastating. All right, we'll get Peter back. Well, and if not, we'll make sure that he tweets out that stat because I know he's been following and been on the Jokic train. Consistency.
I think if it's not Embiid, it's Jokic. I think it's a 2-man race, honestly.
I think so too. All right, we will wait for Peter to get that connection established once again. Oh, there he is. All right, Peter, we got you back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my internet dropped. The connection dropped.
Give us that number one more time from Jokic.
Did we lose him, man?
I think we did.
Okay.
All right. We'll bring Peter back if we get it reestablished. But let's go into best bets. Reed, you're looking on the college side. Both Peter and I are looking on the NBA tonight. So who do you like from the NCAA for today's best bets?
Yeah. So just I wouldn't even call it rule of thumb, but just something to keep in mind. These tournament games where the teams are set like that day, you're not going to get the lines at like your typical time. Like obviously you have like your projected openers, but the Chattanooga Furman SoCon Championship, the line literally just got posted at a few shops, if you want to call it that, a few offshore books. But it's opening around -1. I would take Chattanooga up to 1.5. They beat Furman both times this season. One time without Silvio De Sousa, their star big man. Again, Furman, high-powered offense, but they're going up against the best defense in the SoCon, so that's kind of the match to keep an eye on. But Chattanooga with Malachi Smith and De Sousa, I think they have too much firepower here. Also, Furman was in a dogfight yesterday. Last night was the last game of the day against Samford. That game went down to the wire. I just think Chattanooga's better. -1, -1.5, that's fine. I think Chattanooga wins. Just want to punch a ticket. Also, sleeper to make it to the second week in the tournament. Do not sleep on the Chattanooga team.
Also, they are a pick 'em right now at WinBet. So if you
it opened at WinBet. Okay, pick 'em, go get it.
Yeah, then absolutely go ahead and jump on that line. Peter, you and I are looking NBA tonight. Tell us the play for you.
Yeah, speaking of Luka Doncic that we've been talking about, I'm going to take the Mavs -1 here, 1.5 here against the Jazz. Jazz on the second night of a back-to-back. Really haven't been impressed by them lately. They didn't cover against OKC yesterday, and it ended up getting really close. I think it closed at 13.5, but it was an 8-point game with like a minute to go, and then OKC kind of almost blew the cover. That would have been a terrible beat. But they also had to go to OT against the Rockets. They were blown out by 30 against the Pelicans. And this Mavericks team, like I said, they're 22-7 since the new year. Luka's going to be back tonight. They were able to win their last game, even though he didn't play. And the big thing with Dallas right now is they're 4th in offensive rating over their last 10 games. This has been a team that's hung their hat on the defensive end. They play at the slowest pace in the NBA. So the fact that they're 4th in offensive rating, like they're executing very well right now. And I just think Utah, as good as Utah's offense has been this year, I just don't know if they have an answer for Luka. So I like the Mavs as small favorites at home.
All right, Mavs at -1.5 against Utah. I'm staying in the NBA as well. I like Detroit. How about the Detroit Pistons as of late? Going and playing hard for Dwayne Casey and starting to cover some games in the process. They've actually covered in every game but one since the middle of February. They're 6-1 against the spread. And they're 6-0-1. I should say that one other game that there was a push. 6-0-1 against the spread in their last 7 games. Meanwhile, we've heard about that crazy stat about Atlanta that either they win, and when they do win, they end up covering. When they lose, they end up failing to cover in almost every single game. The Hawks are also atrocious on the road against the spread. They're 10-21-0. And then I was thinking, how does this relate? Is Detroit actually playing better, or are other teams playing poorly? Went over to NBA.com, went in through their different numbers as far as advanced stats go. Defensive rating, they are all the way up to top 13 in the league over their last 7 games. They're playing on a much better level. Their offensive rating is right now hovering around middle of the pack, especially against the Atlanta team that doesn't come in typically motivated on the road, and you have Cade Cunningham to help neutralize Trae Young as best you can, I think it's a matchup that makes a lot of sense, and it's still plenty of points for a team that's been playing better, that's been covering in a lot of games. So give me Detroit plus 7.5 against Atlanta at home. I think it's a very favorable matchup, especially with the way that they're playing now. And that is our show. Again, apologize for the voice being a little bit under the weather, but great stuff from my guys Peter and Reed. Make sure you guys go ahead and give us a follow over on social media as well. We are at BetSided on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Also, make sure you guys give us a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channel as well, or wherever you get your podcast. Kindly leave us a review. We certainly do appreciate it. So for my guys, Peter and Reed, I am Ben. We will be back tomorrow for our best bets for conference tournament week, and then a brand new bet and breakfast on Thursday. Until then, may all of your best bet hits. Until then, we'll talk to you guys soon. Be good.